Let's get on to the big news today. The Victorian-based AFL club struck an agreement that made a current player who has suffered multiple concussions legally responsible for any future brain injuries sustained on the field. Of course, that has been revealed this afternoon, and it is the Geelong Football Club, and they have released a statement, and then we'll dig into it a bit further, Cal.
Yeah, let's go first to the AFL and AFLPA statement, which just came out a couple of minutes ago. So I'll read you some lines and we can get some reaction immediately. So the AFL and AFLPA are aware of a complex and unique case in which a Geelong player was cleared as fit to play following an assessment by an AFL concussion panel. The player then signed a letter acknowledging the potential risk and sought to waive some potential future legal rights, which was not lodged with or approved by the AFL or AFLPA. Geelong has advised the AFL today that the waiver in the letter will be removed, noting that the player continues to acknowledge potential risks. The AFL is satisfied that the letter was not used by Geelong to allow a medically unfit player to return to play. The AFL and AFLPA will advise clubs that any proposed arrangements that impact on a player's legal rights and protections will be required to be notified to and approved by the AFL and AFLPA. So that's that element. And just in the last minute or two, Geelong has released a statement as well. So go through some of the main parts of this one. The club was not attempting to vary the terms of the AFL standard playing contract or attempting to avoid its responsibilities under health and safety laws. The club's focus throughout the process was providing care and support to the player with the intention to give the player agency in the decision-making process around their own playing career. The club always aims to ensure that players are provided with information to enable them to make informed decisions about their careers. At the time, the club was in extensive discussions with a player, their family, and representative in relation to that player's concussion history. Those discussions, including medical advice from the club's chief medical officer and AFL concussion panel, were documented in the letter signed by the player. No direction was given to requiring the player to medically retire.
133 693 is the Nick Theodosi open line. Love to get your thoughts. So the big question is then, why would you go to all that effort? Because if it's all, no, quickly, let's take it back. I know I'm making that sound pretty plain and simple, but if it's been quickly removed and then we don't want to discharge any of our responsibility, what was the need for it at the time?
Well, that's going to be the follow-up, isn't it? And we know that the discussion out of today is clearly that the player was keen to go on, and this was something that was discussed as part of the conversations at the time between the player and the club. The other part in this that I think has been a missing block, which Geelong also mentions in its statement, is that it didn't speak to the AFL Players Association along the way, and that raised some red flags today.
So is it quite possible that this player, they've been cleared regarding concussion, not being medically retired, but the club had raised concerns with his management when doing their next contract, going, look, we're a little bit concerned because you're heading down the path of being medically retired, and we've now got to this point, well, hey, we'll just accept responsibilities, even though we've got the all clear, but future we might not. Am I reading between the lines here?
That's the way it sounds, isn't it? That's the way it sounds. And, I mean, this is going to wave through a number of other discussion points now, namely, I think, what sort of liability clubs should and will hold, and we'll speak to Amit Baines about that shortly as well from the Western Bulldogs, but also the players themselves around the risks that they take in stepping out onto a field every time.
So the discussion always comes up, and then there'll be, and no doubt on the Nick Theodosi Open on 133 693, someone who's a contract lawyer. So every time the discussion gets raised around, well, do we need to get to a point where a waiver or call it a terms and conditions gets signed before you actually sign your playing contract? So hypothetically, player sits down with the legal representative plus player manager plus football manager and whoever else needs to be in the room. Hey, do you accept the risks involved in continuing to play or to play AFL football? Yes, once both sides have signed that. And also from a club point of view, hey, we accept the fact that we have to take full care and responsibility. You accept the risk. Done. Here's your playing contract. Sign. So then we always get a phone call, because we've raised this topic many times on AW, and I've heard it across many mediums. Now, we can punch holes in that. It won't stand up. But there needs to be at least heading towards some solution. Where we're currently sitting at the moment in time can't remain, can it?
There's too much grey. There's absolutely too much grey. And I'd like to ask Jack about his view on this as well, because you've seen the story today, you've seen the responses now, and you've been in a position yourself where you've had a concussion or two that has been sort of knocked you around at different points of your career. Putting a player's perspective on this story today, what did you think?
Yeah, I just think it's obviously there's a level of complexity to it from both parties. So, and that's all parties involved. So that's the medical professionals, that's the club, and that's the player themselves. As a player, you want your career to last as long as you can. So the thought of potentially being medically retired or having to retire because of concussion or other injuries is quite daunting, because it creeps up on you. You don't know when it's going to come. So I understand the level or the layer from the player there, and sort of removing his legal rights. But the club as well, because we've seen with insurance claims and they're not going through, and the trouble surrounding all of that, it makes the responsibility for clubs difficult. So I really do understand both perspectives, and trying to sort of cover themselves, I guess.
You used the word there, complexity. Does it become a bigger story because when it happened, the chairman of Geelong and sitting on the board who ticked off this letter or waiver, whatever term we want to use, and I don't mean that lightly, is now the chairman of the AFL, and you add to the layer too that the class action going on, and Geelong already flagging the fact that if that class action's to go through, they are going to put their previous medical teams, in their own legal case.
Yeah, absolutely. There's extra layers to this, isn't there? And that'll come through in the next set of questioning when Chris Scott and Geelong do speak, as well as the AFL when they speak. Now, Craig Drummond being the central figure of both of these scenarios as the new AFL Commission chairman, but also the long-term president of the Geelong Football Club. It also comes with the WorkSafe backdrop as well, that they are investigating the AFL's concussion management protocols, as well as you say, a class action to go to trial next year, which is involving more than 100 former AFL players on the impacts of repeated head trauma. So all of this thrown in makes this pretty obvious why this became a huge talking point today. Jim, do you have a different view on it now, having played and gone through your career? We speak to Jack, who's in the middle of his career, or towards the back end of the career, and seeing that it evolved. But now you're well past it. Do you have a different view on how you see things as a player versus now?
I'm definitely a lot more educated and informed. I think we all are, and the long-term impacts of concussion. Am I concerned? I think I'm pretty open-minded as far as how I guess your own personal responsibility and how you look after yourself, during your playing career, post your playing career. I've never just personally, and again, this is my own personal experience, and others might have different points of view. I never felt like I was put at risk by my club, Geelong, Geelong as well, and the medical team there. So, but that's my personal experience, and it'll be different for every players and what they feel is a level of care. So, I think it's a lot longer conversation. Again, it's very complex, but it just feels like we're stuck in this space at the moment, and we don't know how to move forward. And I don't mean move forward and just wipe our hands on it, but how do we move forward in a positive way?
We might talk about the issue of the day, which is concussion and the Geelong Football Club. And we can't name the player, obviously, but the fact that this waiver or legal document exists, you wanted to talk about a couple of issues with me. But I guess firstly, as a player, would you have ever considered signing one of those?
Yeah, I'll go down the part that rather than just me, I think there's two arguments with this one. There's the argument of that someone's one of the Geelong's gone behind. I think it's Geelong.
It's Geelong.
It's announced that way.
Yep.
They've gone and kind of around what every other club's doing and what the standard player contract is, and done something different. I think that's very, very strange, and I'm very interested to see how it's sort of covered from the AFL.
All of our legal experts are saying it wouldn't stand up in court.
Yeah, so there's a very interesting argument around this and where that ends up. I'm fascinated. There's a separate argument and a separate discussion, I think, around the risk of the game, and that concussion is a risk in the game. I've always been one that I never understood why it wasn't part of our playing contract that you sign in a roundabout to a waiver about saying that there's an inherent risk of the game and it's a contact sport and you are at risk of concussion. We're going to do everything we can possibly do to limit it, but you're going to be exposed either way. I always thought that the reason why they did that was as the AFL, was to get themselves out of legislation of all the players that played before, saying, hey, we never signed that and we never got told that was the risk. So this example of a club going and doing that is really opening up a broader discussion around player safety and how much risk can you actually take out of the game. I'm a believer you can't take it all out, and there's a risk as a player when you go out there that you understand, and you understand that it's like a boxer goes out and boxes. They know they're at risk of doing it. And NFL, everyone's the same. It's a contact sport, but where this kind of goes, and I think the AFL does a great job in trying to limit as much as they can. But we're never going to get rid of it. So where does it go?
Unless you completely change the way you play football, which is what makes the game so great. So it's that old argument about the way you tackle and how often you tackle and the insight. Like, I mean, even if you speak to and former players like yourself, they'll often say, you're asking us to make decisions in a millisecond.
Yeah.
When it involves tackling, and sometimes you're not going to get that right.
Yeah, it's a 360 game. The game moves at speed, and so much of the game these days is about putting on pressure. So putting on pressure is how fast can you tackle someone, and then if you tackle them softly, for example, then they have an opportunity to get rid of the ball, and then the ball stays in transition. You don't execute the skill well enough. To remove contact from the game would be a huge thing to do, and that it would take the fabric out of the game. So you kind of park that side of it because I don't think you'll be able to. Where this legislation side goes is a really interesting, watch for the next a little while at least. And now it's kind of been brought to everyone's attention that a club's gone out and done, what I've been thinking for a number of years of why aren't players asked to sign it? And there's probably smarter people than me to understand why from a legislation perspective or just the player health and safety perspective. I'm not smart enough to live in that space, but I've always been one of as a player being like, I don't understand why no one's ever asked us to kind of not sign our life away. That's not the right terms, but sign something to say there's a significant risk in playing AFL footy to your head and to have concussions, and that's just part of the fabric of the game in the end. Because unless you take out tackling, high marks, which is
the game, then isn't the game.
Then the game's not the game. So that's the hard place. Where the AFL's at the moment is where they go from here.
Can I ask you, and I don't know off the top of my head, and I apologise, but in terms of concussions that you may have received, do you still have, how long were the side effects, and do you worry about that later in life?
I was pretty lucky across my career. Maybe my head was too hard, I'm not sure, but I got very few. I had one when I was in juniors footy, when I was like 16. I played senior footy and I was 15, and someone dropped me on my head, which is great. But other than that, I had maybe one or two shake-ups, but I wouldn't call them I didn't lose consciousness.
You never entered the concussion protocol?
No concussion protocol, and then ultimately no sort of side effects of any of those slight knocks. So I was probably pretty lucky across my career. I know other players that have had one big one, and then that's messed them around for like 6 to 8 weeks. So it's a really hard topic to know exactly what to do, and this is because it's at the fabric. The contact is at the fabric of the game. It's something you're never going to be able to get out completely. So, I'm interested to see where this one goes in terms of a player signed. Basically, the agreement that I was kind of viewing in my mind about what a lot of players would sign. Is that going to be legally binding? That's going to be an interesting part, which you just said it's not going to be legally binding from a lot of lawyers. And then where does that wider discussion go about the inherent risk of AFL? How much of it is accepted by the players beforehand?